Glock 9 is currently serving a prison sentence of up to 7 years, and throughout his time before he was sentenced, he frequently had run-ins with the cops. Glock 9 was a talented rapper, but was never able to get off the dangerous life of the streets, and this ultimately led to his prison sentencing after he was arrested for being in possession of drugs and a gun. Let's take a look at how he reacted to his sentencing after being tried in court. Glock 9's sentence. Jaquavius Smith, known to fans as Glock 9, faces the stark reality of his criminal actions. The Orlando rapper, who climbed the charts as Glock 9, now stares down the grim corridors of federal prison. The charges laid out in the federal indictment were severe and numerous. Jaquavius Smith, the man behind the moniker Glock 9, was accused of possession of an unregistered firearm, using another person's identity, and committing a crime while on pretrial release. Charges that painted a picture of a pattern of disregard for the law. In a move that surprised his fans and the rap community, Glock 9 entered a guilty plea. This admission of guilt was pivotal, marking a departure from the defiance often celebrated in rap culture. The plea signaled a reckoning for Glock 9 as he acknowledged the weight of the evidence against him and the reality that his actions could no longer be outrun. He was also ordered to pay $10,416 in restitution. Before the gavel fell and the sentence was handed down, Glock 9 was a beacon of promise in the rap industry. Emerging from the vibrant streets of Orlando, Glock 9's gritty lyrics and relentless flow captured the essence of his environment, propelling him to the forefront of Florida's rap scene. His music, a raw portrayal of life on the streets, resonated with fans, earning him millions of streams and views and the respect of industry heavyweights. As Glock 9's star rose, so did the scrutiny. His lyrics, often depicting the violence and drug trade of street life, began to attract the attention of law enforcement. In 2019, Smith was arrested on charges of attempted second-degree murder with a firearm in which he fired at an Orlando home with a woman and her children inside, but no one was hit. A witness to the crime scene said they saw Glock 9 standing outside the home moments before the shooting, and media houses gave their insight as to the motive of the shooting.
Investigators say the intended target was another rapper Smith had a dispute with. In court documents, the witness said Smith, also known by his stage name of Glock 9, was jealous, adding, quote, "Glock 9 wants to be the only rapper coming from Orlando."
Although he was released on bail, this brush with the law was a harbinger of the storm that was brewing on the horizon. The following year, in 2020, Glock 9 found himself in legal hot water once again. He was arrested multiple times over the course of several months on charges ranging from possession of a firearm by a convicted felon to attempted murder. During this tumultuous period, the RICO case began to take shape. The Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, a federal law designed to combat organized crime, became the tool that prosecutors wielded against Glock 9 and his associate. In a shocking turn of events, Smith and 33 others were indicted under the RICO Act, accused of being part of a criminal enterprise that engaged in racketeering activities, including drug trafficking, armed robbery, and even murder. The indictment painted a picture of Glock 9 not just as a rapper, but as a key figure in a dangerous gang known as the AFNF gang. The gang, named after the local area code in Orlando, was alleged to have been involved in a series of violent crimes that terrorized the community. The charges against Smith included conspiracy to commit racketeering, which carried severe penalties under federal law. As the news of the indictment broke, the rap community and fans alike were left in shock. The gravity of the situation was undeniable, with the potential for life-altering consequences for Glock 9 and his co-defendants. The RICO case against him threatened to dismantle everything he had built, casting a long shadow over his future in music and beyond. The implications of the RICO charges were severe. If found guilty, Glock 9 could face decades in prison, effectively ending his career and changing the course of his life forever. The RICO Act, an acronym for the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, was enacted in the early 1970s as a powerful legal tool to combat organized crime. It allows for the leaders of a syndicate to be tried for the crimes they ordered others to do or assisted them in doing. In the case of Glock 9, the charges under this act placed him at the center of a sprawling investigation that sought to dismantle what prosecutors labeled a criminal enterprise. The allegations against Smith were grave. Prosecutors claimed that he was a part of a larger conspiracy that included a series of criminal activities spanning several years. The indictment alleged that Glock 9, along with his associates, participated in and facilitated the operation of the AFNF gang, which engaged in narcotics distribution, armed robberies, and violent crimes, including homicide. On a phone call with WFTV correspondents, Glock 9 denied any criminal involvement with AFNF. The evidence presented by the prosecution was extensive. It included a combination of surveillance footage, witness testimonies, and most controversially, the lyrics from Glock 9's own music. music. Prosecutors argued that his songs were not just artistic expressions, but also admissions of criminal conduct and a means to communicate with gang members. They pointed to specific lyrics that referenced guns, violence, and drug dealing, suggesting these were not fictional accounts but real-life confessions. The first in a string of incidents involved a Glock 22.40 caliber gun found with 18 rounds of ammunition, a possession that would haunt him as a convicted felon. This was followed by an indictment for possession of oxycodone, a controlled substance that further complicated his legal situation. But it was the charge of possession of an unregistered firearm, an MK4 semi-automatic rifle, that began to solidify the severity of his predicament. As if the gun charges weren't damning enough, Glock 9 was also caught in the web of identity theft, using another person's name, social security number, and address to commit wire fraud. This fraudulent act was linked to a COVID-19 relief scheme, where he unlawfully obtained $10,000 through the federal Paycheck Protection Program. These incidents culminated in a federal case leading to Glock 9's sentencing. Despite his legal team's efforts, the weight of the evidence against him was overwhelming. The court documents painted a picture of a young man who had let the allure of the streets overtake the promise of his music career. This arrest was not just a stumble, it was a fall that saw the Orlando rapper swap the microphone for a mugshot and the cheers of fans for the clang of prison doors. The courtroom was tense as Glock 9, clad in the orange of an inmate rather than the gold of a rap star, faced the consequences of his actions. The legal proceedings were a meticulous affair, with each charge laid out before him like a verse in a somber song of his own making. In a bid to lessen the impending blow, a plea deal was struck, a last-ditch effort to salvage what remained of his freedom and career. Under the terms of the plea, Glock 9 admitted guilt to the federal charges of possession of an unregistered firearm, aggravated identity theft, and being a felon in possession of a firearm and ammunition. The plea deal was a double-edged sword, offering a reduced sentence but confirming his admission of guilt. The final sentencing was a dramatic climax to the legal saga that had captivated and shocked fans. The judge handed down an 87-month sentence in federal prison, equating to over 7 years behind bars. But the sentence was more than just time. It came with strings attached. Upon release, Glock 9 would be tethered to a 3-year supervised release program, complete with mandatory drug testing, a stark reminder of the life he would have to rebuild. The court also mandated restitution, with Glock 9 ordered to pay $10,416, a financial penalty that paled in comparison to the cost of his lost time and potential. As Glock 9 grappled with the reality of his federal prison sentence, the legal labyrinth in which he found himself entangled only grew more complex. The federal sentence was but one chapter in a legal saga that continued to unfold. Beyond the walls of the federal institution, state charges loomed large, casting a long shadow over any hope of a swift return to his former life. The state charges were serious and multifaceted, including racketeering and attempted second-degree murder. These allegations suggested a deeper entanglement in criminal activities and painted a starkly different picture of the Orlando rapper compared to the persona his fans adored. The gravity of these charges hinted at the possibility of an even longer separation from his music career and the life he knew. The potential impact of these ongoing legal challenges on Glock 9's future was significant. Yet, even as Glock 9 begins to serve his time, the legal battles are far from over. He still faces additional charges, including attempted second-degree murder, which stem from allegations of firing a gun into an occupied dwelling. These pending charges could add further time to his sentence, compounding the already severe repercussions of his actions. Criminal history. As a child, Jaquavius harbored dreams of becoming a footballer.
Be a football player. Everybody thought they were gonna make it out either playing basketball or football. That's everybody's way to make it out. I ain't no rapper.
It's unfortunate he never made it as a pro athlete. The gravitational pull of his environment was strong, and the streets of West Orlando were a relentless tutor. The lessons learned there were harsh, and they came at a cost. The aspirations of a young athlete slowly gave way to the survival instincts of a teenager navigating a world where the line between right and wrong was often blurred by necessity. The influence of his environment was undeniable, and it seeped into the music that Jaquavius would come to create. His lyrics, a raw and unfiltered reflection of the life he knew, were underscored by the beats that spoke the language of the streets. His musical influences, like T-Pain and Lil Wayne, were the soundtrack to his life, and artists who had risen from similar circumstances claimed their thrones in the pantheon of hip-hop royalty. But even as Jaquavius began to find his voice in the music world, the shadows of his past legal encounters loomed large. His first brush with the law came at the tender age of 15. In September 2015, the sound of gunfire shattered the relative calm of his neighborhood, and a 17-year-old was left hospitalized hospitalized. The incident began a series of legal battles that would follow Glock 9 for years to come. Charged with aggravated battery with a firearm and unlawful discharge of a firearm, he was thrust into the juvenile justice system, a stark departure from the football fields of his dreams. The Orange Regional Juvenile Detention Center became a temporary home for the young rapper, a place where the consequences of his actions were laid bare. It was a pivotal moment in Jaquavius's life, a crossroads that forced him to confront the reality of his path. Yet, even as he faced the repercussions of that fateful day, the spirit of Glock 9 could not be caged. His determination to rise above his circumstances only grew stronger, and his music became his outlet and escape. The legal encounters of his youth were a prelude to the challenges that lay ahead. As Glock 9's star began to rise in the music industry, so too did the scrutiny of his past. The streets that had raised him were both his muse and his adversary, a constant reminder of where he came from and the forces that sought to pull him back. In the unfolding chapters of Glock 9's life, the dichotomy of his existence became increasingly clear. Here was a young man with the talent to transcend his beginnings, yet tethered to them by a history that refused to be forgotten. His early legal encounters were not just a footnote in his story, they were the prologue to a tale that was still being written, a narrative that would captivate and caution in equal measure. As Glock 9's music career began to take flight, the gravity of his past pulled him back to earth with a series of legal challenges that threatened to derail his ascent. The ink had barely dried on his Cash Money Records contract when, on October 3rd, 2018, he found himself again entangled with the law. This time, he faced charges including possession of a concealed weapon by a convicted delinquent, grand theft in the third degree, possession of less than 20 grams of marijuana with the intent to distribute, and illegal firearm possession, which he denied at the point of arrest.
Well, you know there's a gun in here, right? You are a convicted felon. I'm telling you that now, but there is a gun in here. Yeah, you didn't know that? You sure you didn't have your hands on it? Because we're going to find out.
Nah, I just got in the car.
These incidents cast a long shadow over his burgeoning career, as each arrest added to the narrative that his music was more than just art. It was a mirror of his reality. Despite these setbacks, Glock 9 continued to release music, including his mixtape Mind of Destruction in October 2019. However, his legal woes persisted. In January 2020, he was arrested in Miami for carrying a concealed weapon. By July, he faced even graver charges of attempted second-degree murder. His repeated run-ins with the law painted a picture of a young man caught in a cycle of recidivism, struggling to reconcile his past with his future. The relentless rhythm of Glock 9's music career was disrupted by the staccato beats of his legal issues, casting a shadow over his creative output and public image. With each arrest, the rapper's narrative was increasingly defined not just by his music, but by the mugshots and court appearances that punctuated his rise to fame. The impact was immediate and multifaceted, affecting his ability to tour, collaborate, and produce new work. The legal entanglements also began to shape the public's perception of Glock 9. Fans and critics alike started to view his lyrics through the prism of his real-life actions, questioning the authenticity of his storytelling versus the glorification of a lifestyle that was leading him down a perilous path. The media coverage of his arrests often overshadowed his musical releases, and the rapper's name became as synonymous with criminal headlines as it was with chart-topping hits. The music industry, built on a foundation of image and perception, watched closely as Glock 9's legal battles unfolded. Record labels and collaborators weighed the risks of associating with an artist whose potential was matched by his propensity for finding trouble. Despite the undeniable talent Glock 9 possessed, the uncertainty surrounding his freedom and ability to fulfill his professional commitments became a liability. By 2018, his brushes with the law weren't just personal trouble. They threatened to overshadow his burgeoning fame. To the local law enforcement, Glock 9 was no longer just a rapper with potential. He was seen as a ringleader of AFNF the Army, a gang marked by the FBI as one of Florida's most notorious. The gang feuds, particularly with rival gang 438, led by fellow Florida rapper Hot Boy, were not just a war of words but had devastating real-world consequences, including the tragic deaths of innocents like 3-year-old DeQuayne James Felix Jr. and 14-year-old Dennis Joshua Atkinson. As AFNF's notoriety spread, so did its reputation. They were labeled as one of the most violent gangs in the region, a title that brought with it the attention of the FBI. The Army was on the radar, watching their every move and scrutinizing their every action. But this scrutiny only seemed to fuel their infamy. Their name whispered in hushed tones in the corners where the law dared not tread. The gang's activities were a tapestry of the illicit and the dangerous. Allegations of shootings, drug dealings, and a string of arrests followed in their wake, painting a picture of a gang that operated without fear. Glock 9 himself was no stranger to the inside of a cell, and his rap sheet was proof of the life he lived and the company he kept. The war between AFNF and 438 was not just fought in the physical realm, but also in the digital world. Social media became a battleground where accusations flew like bullets, with both Glock 9 and Hot Boy accusing each other of cooperating cooperating with law enforcement, a cardinal sin in the unwritten code of the streets. These public exchanges only served to fuel the fire, each post and each live stream adding to the inferno of their rivalry. The rivalry got heated to the point where it was reported in the news that there was an open exchange of fire between the rival gang members.
More than 24 hours after a shooting at the mall at Millennia, 19-year-old Trayvon Graham sits in jail charged with attempted first-degree. Orlando police say one of his intended targets was 20-year-old Jaquarius Smith, a local rapper known as Glock 9.
As the body count rose, so did the stakes. The shooting of Wolf Luther King Luma, a 438 affiliate, at a house party in Davenport by an AFNF member, and the subsequent targeting of mourners at his funeral were stark illustrations of the lengths to which each side would go to assert their dominance and avenge their fallen. The cycle of violence seemed unending, each retaliation begetting further bloodshed. The law enforcement response was swift and severe, with arrests and charges laid against members of both gangs. However, the arrests did little to quell the unrest. If anything, they served as a catalyst for further conflict, with each side vowing to stand their ground and continue the fight. Chronicling his criminal history, in September 2015, Smith, who was 15 years old at the time, was arrested in connection to a shooting that left a 17-year-old hospitalized. He was charged with aggravated battery with a firearm, an unlawful discharge of a firearm, and also had a violation of probation for trespassing. He was then taken to the Orange Regional Juvenile Detention Center. On October 3, 2018, Smith was arrested on multiple charges, including possession of a concealed weapon by a convicted delinquent, grand theft in the third degree, and possession of less than 20 grams of marijuana. On May 31, 2019, Smith was arrested in Orlando, Florida, and charged with multiple counts, including possession of marijuana and illegal firearm possession. On January 3, 2020, Smith was arrested in Miami, Florida, and charged with carrying a concealed weapon. On July 24, 2020, he was arrested in Orlando and charged with attempted second-degree murder. On October 8, 2020, he was arrested in Orlando on an outstanding warrant related to charges for possession of a firearm by a convicted felon and possession of a short-barreled rifle, and the officer's body cam captured the encounter.
You want to talk to me where you got these guns from? No.
Glock 9 could not just stop running into encounters with the police. In January 2021, he was charged with multiple counts of attempted second-degree murder. On June 21, 2021, he was arrested on charges including racketeering and conspiracy to commit racketeering. On December 15, 2021, Smith was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to identity theft and possession of unregistered firearms charges. He had fraudulently applied for and received benefits through the Paycheck Protection Act under another person's name. On April 9, 2024, Smith was charged with directing the activities of a criminal gang and second-degree murder for a shooting that occurred on April 25, 2020. Life in prison. The transition from the limelight to the confines of a federal prison cell was a jarring shift for Glock 9. His new reality was defined by the rigid routines and strict hierarchies of prison life, a far cry from the freedom and admiration he once enjoyed. In this austere environment, reputations are both forged and shattered, and the whispers of the incarcerated can carry the weight of judgment. Within these walls, Glock 9 found himself embroiled in a controversy that threatened to upend the precarious social order of prison life. Allegations of snitching, a grave accusation in the penal system, began to circulate, casting a pall over his already challenging circumstances. The source of these allegations was none other than fellow inmate and Atlanta rapper Ola Runt, who took to Twitter with a cryptic message that sent the rumor mill into overdrive. He tweeted, "Damn Glock 9, you went out bad," followed by 2 rat emojis, a clear insinuation that Glock 9 had broken the convict code. A YouTuber called 1090 Jake alleged that another inmate stabbed Glock 9 as a result of his snitching, which he says he learned from the Orlando native's girlfriend. The implications of such an accusation are severe in the prison context, where the label of a snitch can lead to social ostracization or worse, physical harm. The fact that both rappers were housed in the same federal prison only added fuel to the fire, as inmates and outsiders alike speculated on the veracity of the claims and the potential fallout. The allegations centered around an incident involving Glock 9 that an inmate with a contraband phone purportedly recorded. The rumor was that Glock 9 had been involved in a fight and in the aftermath had provided information to the authorities. However, the narrative was muddled, with conflicting reports about whether the altercation had actually taken place and what, if any, information was exchanged. Adding to the complexity was the fact that both Glock 9 and Ola Runt were reputed to have ties to the same gang. X-Money and were seen in prison photos using the gang's infamous pistol gang sign. This affiliation suggested that the two rappers should have been allies within the prison's gang dynamics, making the public nature of the allegations all the more puzzling and provocative. As the prison community buzzed with talk of the allegations, those close to Glock 9 awaited his call, hoping for his side of the story to emerge. The tension was palpable, with the potential for the situation to escalate into violence ever present. In the meantime, Glock 9's legal team worked to counter the narrative, pointing to his clean paperwork and the absence of a 5K1 motion, which would indicate a sentencing reduction in exchange for substantial assistance to prosecutors. There is something else about his life in prison that is very noticeable: his physical transformation in prison. He went from this outside prison to this in prison. He appears to have added weight in prison, and that's remarkable. The walls of the prison have witnessed a transformation that has become a subject of much discussion among fans and the public alike. A significant physical metamorphosis has marked Glock 9's life behind bars, one that was recently revealed in a series of photos shared by a fan account on Instagram. The images, which surfaced on May 25, 2023, showcased a Glock 9 that appeared markedly different from the figure fans remembered. Gone were the trademark dreadlocks, replaced by an afro that signaled a new chapter in the rapper's life. More striking, perhaps, was the change in his physique. The once trim frame of Glock 9 had filled out, suggesting that his time in prison included a rigorous fitness regimen. These photos sparked a flurry of reactions from his fan base. Comments ranged from expressions of shock at his changed appearance to messages of support and calls for his freedom. Glock 9's transformation in prison is not just physical, it also hints at a possible shift in mindset and priorities. While details of his daily life and activities behind bars are not extensively documented, the visual evidence of his transformation suggests a dedication to personal development in the face of adversity. The incarceration of Glock 9 echoes beyond the confines of his cell, touching on broader themes within the hip-hop community and societal discussions about the criminal justice system. His 7-year sentence casts a long shadow on a career that was once burgeoning with potential, raising questions about the future of his music and the impact of his absence on the industry. The hip-hop community has often been vocal about the criminal justice system, and Glock 9's case is no exception. His peers and fans have engaged in conversations about the challenges faced by artists who find themselves entangled in legal troubles. The dialogue extends to the systemic issues that disproportionately affect young black men, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds who turn to music as a form of expression and escape. For Glock 9, the sentence means a hiatus from creating and performing music, which could have lasting effects on his career trajectory. The industry moves rapidly, and time away can lead to losing relevance and missed opportunities. However, history has shown that time spent incarcerated does not always spell the end of an artist's career. Sometimes it can lead to a resurgence, with the artist returning to the scene with new perspectives and experiences that enrich their artistry. The response from Glock 9's fan base also highlights a societal commentary on the nature of punishment and rehabilitation. The calls for his freedom and the support shown in light of his transformation suggest a desire for a justice system that prioritizes growth and second chances. It underscores a conversation about the potential for redemption and the belief that individuals can change. For more interesting videos like this, click on any of the cards displayed on your screen.